So, just starting the recording here, and I kind of already gave an introduction to the class before I started the recording, but I was more or less saying that if you look at this slide, the list view control is basically what this chapter is about. And the way that I look at the list view control is that it's a more powerful grid view. And I'll kind of walk through a lot of demonstrations in using this list view, and you'll see why I consider it to be a better tool. In several ways. Now, grid view is fine, and if that's what you need to do and it's simple enough, then you can still use the grid view, but this is another tool in your toolbox, if you will. So if you look at our specific objectives, we're going to work with the list view control and the different templates. So we've worked with templates before, like edit item templates and insert item templates, and you're going to figure out that the list view works purely with templates. So we're definitely going to work with those templates. We're going to use a DataPager control inside of a list view control, and we're going to customize that control a little bit to our liking. And then the third objective, not too many objectives, look at some of the action or some of the events that the list view control can be used for. And the nice thing is it's the same thing as a grid view. So how we use those events in the grid view is the same way we're going to use them in the list view. But really, a list view in its most simple form is just like a grid view. I guess if you had to look at this slide and list one benefit just by looking at this slide, what can this list view do that a grid view cannot? Yeah, you can insert, right? So a grid view doesn't have a built-in way to insert data, whereas a list view does. So as a quick demonstration, instead of just showing you this on a PowerPoint, let me open up Visual Studio here, and I'll build this real quick just to show you how easy it can be to work with the list view. Matter of fact, I was already practicing several of these code examples, so I already have a solution for this. I'll just delete whatever is there, and I'll start with an empty page. So I have an empty ASPX page. If I view the code behind, it's just the default C# code behind, nothing there. Go ahead and add in my SQL data source. I already have a connection string into my Halloween database, so I'll just use my connection string there. And if I glance back at the slide, category ID, short name, and long name, which is in the categories table. Matter of fact, selecting star does the trick. And because this has the ability to edit and delete and insert, I'm going to click on the Advanced tab and just auto-generate my SQL statements. Just like you're working with a grid view, but instead of working with a grid view under data, let me collapse a lot of these. Here's our list view control. Okay, so you saw I just drag on a list view. Looking at the source code out of the box, pretty bare bones, right? We have an ASP server tag, list view. It has an ID and run at server. If I go back into design view and I configure my data source, right away it says choose the list view task to select the layout. Once the item template is created, you may choose a view for the, okay. So what you do at this point is you configure the list view. Okay, and this is what the actual next slide shows you. Now, one of the ways, and we'll do a few of these, one of the ways that a list view is different is you have different ways that you can display each record, right? So if you want each record to be displayed in a bulleted list, okay, grid view can't do that, right? So we already know that a list view can insert data that we know that a grid view can't do out of the box. And we can also kind of see that each record can be displayed in different layouts. Now, if you choose grid, then it's just like a grid view, right? So very simply, let's just choose grid. And our nice little options here, edit, insert, and delete. And now you can see the results of what that slide is showing you. Okay, so that slide was built just by dragging and dropping, haven't written a single line of code. And just by doing that, if I want to insert some new data, and so a category ID, that's our primary key. So, you know, it just has to be unique value. So, I'll just call it candy, since this is Halloween. And so you should be able to insert, edit. Notice when you edit that the primary key is not a text box, it's just a label, but the other columns can be edited. Say candies and lots of candy, so we can update and we can delete. Now, when I was messing around with this, I came across kind of a quirk, and that is in our SQL data source, you might have noticed I did not use optimistic concurrency. Okay, and we've talked about optimistic concurrency in chapter 12 and the benefits of using optimistic concurrency. So I normally check it, but this time I didn't, because when I do that, you get an error for delete. Exactly. And so you can kind of see if I redo my example here, and I go to delete, we get this nasty error message. Okay, and there's a way to fix it. The way that I fixed it, if you want to still use optimistic concurrency, you need to look at the source code. Here's the benefit of ListView Control, is that it's a more powerful tool than the grid view. The downfall of it is you're doing a lot in source code. Maybe you view that as a downfall, maybe you don't. Everyone can make their own judgment. But a lot of what you're going to have to do is hand coding. And so you need to get familiar with the source of our ASPX. Just looking here, this is just our data source. This is nothing new, our SQL data source. But here's our list view. And again, I mentioned earlier that everything's in templates, alternating item template, right? So every other item can be styled or configured inside of this template. The edit item template, so if you go to edit something, you see a text box. Do you have required field validators, you know, data validation, etc. on edit item template? Empty data template, that's if your SQL data source returns no records. So if no data is returned from the database, this will just say no data was returned. Insert item template, kind of what it sounds like it does. When you go to insert new data, we got some text boxes there. We have an item template, so that's just when you're reading data by default, it's looking at the item template. And the layout template. So the layout template's a little bit unique. We haven't seen the layout template before this control. And if you look at the layout template, you're going to see a table and then another table nested within it. But this layout template is the layout for the control. And in here, you could see a nested table. And inside of this table, so if we're looking at the inner table here, we've got two rows. And the first row has all of our table headings. Okay? And so if you want your table headings, instead of, you know, what it says in the database is category ID, maybe you just want it to say category. And you want short name to say short and include the space there, right? So this is where you would configure that in this particular control inside of the layout template.
That's all it takes to fix it?
That's what it takes to fix that, correct. Oh, I'm sorry, to fix the delete issue, I haven't got to that yet. Okay, no, I haven't. It's not quite that simple to fix the delete issue. But I just wanted to show you
That's good there.
to fix
And then here's
these table headings. It's not done through a GUI anymore. It's done through source code. Okay.
all of it.
Now here's the next part that's important with this layout template.
Does it really matter?
You see the item placeholder? The item placeholder will be replaced with, at runtime, whatever template it needs to use. So if you're first loading this web page, basically the placeholder will be replaced with the item template. Okay, if you click on an edit button, the placeholder will be replaced with the edit item template. Okay, so this works a little bit differently just because we've got a placeholder and then it swaps out the templates as needed, if that makes sense. Now, thank you, Mohammed, for bringing me back to my original point, which is I'm having this nasty delete message because of that concurrency. The way, and I had to Google this, okay, and the way I was able to fix it was that in the item template, I had to change these evals to binds. Now, do you guys remember the difference between eval and bind? It was in the textbook, but remember an eval was kind of a read-only function, so you're just evaluating or reading something, okay? Whereas a bind is more of a two-way function. A bind is, hey, if I change something, I can then update it.
On all those, like
Okay.
long name, short name, and
Well, the way I think the shortest way to answer it, I just changed, I don't think because category ID, I wasn't changing the category ID. I was only changing maybe the short name or the long name. And I changed it in my item template. And I think I also changed it in my,
It's already bind and edit item template.
it's already bind and edit item template.
There's an alternating item template.
And I think just for safety here, I'm going to change it here as well.
Then the edit item template or the alternating item template.
Yeah, I changed it in the alternating item template. Let's see, the edit item template already has it. Empty data doesn't need it. We're not inserting, so we don't need it there. In the item template, we changed that to binds. The layout template doesn't have it. And we're not selecting anything, so I don't need a selected item template. From memory, that fixed it. Again, memory's not always the best thing for me. Let's see, delete. There it goes. Okay, so that was kind of a quirky thing that I stumbled across that I was able to fix. Yes, sir.
So, how often does Visual Studio's give errors in their generated code that you know?
Most of the time, I found that it's a mistake that I've made. Okay, maybe I'm not following the process correctly, but in this example, yeah, the code that it generated needed to be fixed. But it's not something that I find super common.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. All right. So kind of going back here, we created this page. You're familiar with these different properties, right? Data source ID, that just ties your list view to a data source. What is data key names? You guys, yes, you're looking at your primary keys listed in the data key names. And the insert item position, that's just where your insert row is located. By default, the insert row is on the bottom. If you want the insert row to go to the top, then you change this property. It's pretty simple. Property to change, I'll do it real quick. If I click on my list view and I go to insert item position, Again, nothing revolutionary here, but it moves it to the top. And now we're happy because it's at the top. Okay, so pretty simple stuff there.
To the bottom, it's in miscellaneous.
Yeah, that was located under
What was it, Miss Lang?
miscellaneous. Yes.
Just click on that thing again. I think you're not.
I went through a lot of these templates just looking at the source code with you guys. Some of these are used more frequently than not. One that we did not cover yet was a group template, but we will cover that by the end of today. Okay, pretty much all of the rest of these I've covered.
Oh, it's not here.
It's in properties.
Um,
Okay, and then you go to.
I want to show you guys something here, and this isn't in the PowerPoint, just something that you might like to see. Each one of these templates has a table row. So let me just find my item template. A lot of scrolling here. Matter of fact, I'll look at the alternating item template, okay? And you can see how each alternating item template has an empty style. I mean, they just have it set up for you to write some CSS right in here. So just to mess with this, right, I'll just change background color. And this is, again, this is in my alternating item. And I'll make this an aqua. Write a little CSS in there. And if I view it in browser, pretty simply, right, I can get every other row to change its background color.
Yeah. It's cool.
All I did is I went to the alternating item template and I changed the background color. So this style tag was already there. Now, if I wanted to change the actual each item, well, that's in the item template. So if I go down to my item template, maybe I want to say font color, or not font color, geez, color green, right? So I change the color of the font. And if I look at this, now each, see, you got the item and then you got alternating item, alternating item. Seth, you had a question?
Well, I was going to ask, when you're editing the alternating item styles, how do you differentiate between like the evens and the odds? But I think you should show that one.
Yep. Okay. Moving forward in the PowerPoint. If you, and again, you can set your own styles. There are a whopping 3 built-in styles. Again, just by messing with this tool a little bit, you're going to find out that it's real easy to reset itself. Take the code that you wrote and reset it and make it disappear. Okay? So my advice on this tool is to try and configure the list view once and then try not to go back here and make too many changes. Because once you make some changes, for example, if I want to change, maybe I just want to add colorful, it'll ask you to regenerate the list view. Okay? Then all your other changes you're going to have to redo.
Even changing the binds to the
Even changing the, yes, even changes the evals back to binds. Okay, it'll reset it. So if I click on yes, and now notice all my edit and delete went away. Like we said before, my
Your style didn't go away.
my evals were still there. Did my style stay put? Well, no, this is a new style, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's
This
not
is-
green and not blood.
It changed it.
Yeah, change my styles. So again, my advice is do your best to configure this list view once, get it how you need it to be set up, and then customize it from there. If you get too far into the customization and then you come back here and have to reconfigure it, it's going to wipe out your customization. Okay. just for you guys to see it, since we're at a good point to demonstrate this, here's a tiled view. So you can get each row put into columns. So example, this is 3 columns. And the textbook shows you, hey, if you want bootstrap columns, you can definitely do that, right? So we only have 4 records. We only have 4 rows of information. But you can see 3 columns, and then here's the 4th record. But it's safe to assume that if you have more records, it would fill this page up in 3 different columns. I will show you how to customize this. What if you want 2 columns? What if you want 4 columns? Okay, it's pretty easy to customize this. Ricardo, you had a question? Control Z. Yeah, would undo. Let's see how far we can undo. That's nice. So if you make a change and you decide you don't want that, or you want to reference some of the code that you wrote, do edit undo. And you get your old stuff back. Let's go into, let's see, bulleted list just to show it. You can see that the item template now has an LI tag. So you guys know what an LI tag is going to do, right? If we view this in the browser. Maybe you've wondered, how could I pull out each person in a database and put each name inside, or each person's information inside of a list? Well, now you know how to do it. Seth?
So I noticed with some of the different forms of this you showed us, they were formatted pretty poorly and kind of bunched together. Is there an easy property to just add some lines between each?
Probably just do this.
Well, again, it's going to be in source code. So each item template, I mean, if you want to add BRs, if you want to add on each LI, if you want to target an LI and add padding or margin to it,
Put a border around it.
put a border around it, you know, you can use your CSS in conjunction with this. Yep. And just to demonstrate it, since I'm showing you all the different, we got flow, which kind of flows top to bottom there. So that's top to bottom flow, and then we've got single row.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah, where everything just goes.
Yeah.
Okay. You see how it's a little bit more flexible than the grid view, though.
Yeah.
Okay. This slide in particular goes over the layout template, which I already pointed out to you in code. How you've got, you know, nested tables. This is where you change your table headings, and then the placeholder swaps out at runtime with whatever item, whichever template it needs. Okay. The next thing that the list view doesn't have an easy way to do this, unfortunately, is sorting. Okay. Whereas a grid view, if we're on a grid view and I clicked on, you know, configure the grid view, somewhere on here there'd be a checkbox to sort, enable sorting, and it's pretty nice and easy. Unfortunately, that's not the case with our list view. Okay, so to enable sorting on a list view, it's a little bit more of a process, and I'll do it several times. So let me get this back just to our there we go. Let me get it back to a grid. Actually, if I look at the PowerPoint, we got product ID, name, category, unit price, and on hand. So that's some different data. I'm going to reconfigure this. I believe the product ID that's in here, product ID, name, category, which that just says category, unit price, and on hand. It does not look like we're doing any sort of insert statements. So I'm not going to do any of that. Test the query and we get our data. Let's put it in a grid, professional. Okay, and again, by default, we're not doing any sort of any sorting. So if I go into source code again, we have to customize this in source code. In our layout template, we know that's where we change our headers. Well, it's safe to say that we're going to be changing our headers here, and they're not just going to be text. Right now, you can see our headers are just plain text. Okay, well, I'm going to delete this run at server, and I'm not going to have the word product ID in there anymore. I'm going to add a certain control called a link button. Okay, and if you look at the link button, it's an ASP server tag, and it ends right here with the text in the middle, whatever the link says. And since this slide shows the product ID, I'm going to make this say product ID. Then there's two properties to configure of this link button. So if I expand my properties window, the command name, so by putting in the word sort, okay, that link is going to know that it's going to sort the data in that column. And the command argument, this is by what column are we sorting? And we are sorting by product ID. Okay, I'm going to do this a few times just so you can see the process. I'm just doing it for the first time here. I know it's a couple steps. You can see now we've got a link there. Okay, and again, it always takes a second. There it goes. It's actually acting fast today.
My product ID.
Look here.
So you can do that link for name and then press
Yeah, I'm gonna do that for name and category as well.
every time you press it, it'll just sort by that category.
Yep. Yep. Okay, so let's do it again for name. Again, I go into source, go into my layout template. My TH no longer needs to run at server, so I'm going to delete that. I'm going to delete the plain text that says name. I'm going to add in the link button. This time it's a different ID for that link button, right? So this one was link button 1, this one's link button 2. Let's see, I believe this was the name column, am I right? Name. And when I'm in the properties of link button 2, command name is still sort, and the command argument is by the name column. So now I can sort by name or product ID. Okay, and the last one is going to be category, and the category column is going to be basically the same. I'll throw in one little twist on that because I know it's in the textbook. Again, layout template, and I go into category ID. And I'll add in my link button. If I glance at the PowerPoint, this just says category. Now the command argument, even though my text says category, I know that the column that I'm sorting by is, in fact, category ID. And the command name is sort. Now, what I'm going to add in my command argument here, I'm going to search first by category ID, comma, name. Right? So that's going to sort by the category first, But then within the category, it'll sort by the name second.
So sometimes when I'm like messing with Excel spreadsheets, and I'm trying to organize it.
Yeah, I just did that.
Like I'll click one and then I'll click a second one so that, like, let's say I wanted to organize it by category and the name. I
Yeah.
click name and I click category.
Yeah.
In this situation, if you didn't set it up to do category name and just category,
Yep.
would it do that? Would it recognize where you last clicked?
No, I don't think so.
So
Matter of fact, just to demonstrate kind of what you're asking, but you can definitely see here, right? So first it's by category, then within the category it's alphabetical order by name. So you can see that that's working as intended. But to answer your question, let's just do it real quick. I don't believe it'll act or behave that way, but we'll double check. So I go into my source code, I go into my layout template, I can go into my third link button. Again, you can change it in the properties window or just change it directly here. And let's view it in the browser. So you were saying if it, okay, we sort first by name. It's back to its normal behaving self, taking a second. Okay, so now we're in alphabetical order here. Now if we sort by category.
So it goes back to the default.
Yeah, the default order of the select statement. Yeah. Okay, so that's how you work with sorting with this particular control.
Can you see the properties for the?
Sure. You want to see the properties of the link button?
Yeah, just because mine's not sorting. So the command argument is just the name of the column.
This is the name of the column, correct? In the database.
Command name is what you want it to do.
Correct.
So it's sort.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I.
Yep. Seth?
Is there a simple way to format the unit price so it shows up as $sign and then only 2 decimal periods?
Yeah, so let me think about that. So inside of our, let's look at that. If we want the item template, 'cause that's in the item template, and here's our unit price, and we want it to show up as 2 decimal places, we can go into item template, and it does say, see, this is what I was saying, design time editing is not supported for this. So it doesn't really work that way, unfortunately. So we're going to have to do it in source code. So with other tools like the grid view, you got the nice little GUI editor to help you with that. Not with this control. My gut tells me I want to write another function in here, like a convert to 2 decimal places. But let me look into that a little bit more, okay? Because I don't know the answer off the top of my head. But I will look into that and see if I can't find an easy way to display 2 decimal places with this tool. I can do it with other tools. Let's see if a quick Google search, ListView, display 2.
Good set question.
No, it's a good question. See if
PowerPoint had it like that, so I was just wondering.
Sure.
If they did.
Sure. I'm gonna pause the video here, see if we come up with a quick solution or not. I'll resume this in just 1 minute here, or pause the recording. Okay, so I'm resuming the recording here. We're going to take a break in just a second here. It took us a good 10 minutes or so to figure this one out. It was just working with the string dot format from our C# days, but so the initial fix that we found was on our item template for the unit price. We did a string dot format. You put the type of format in quotes, followed by a comma, followed by the eval function. And that in fact did work, but we're also going to have to apply it to our alternating item template so that it works with every other item. So we'll do it again here, string dot format quotes here 0, C 0 colon C curly quote comma. And now closing parenthesis. Save it up, design view, view in browser. And now our prices are in 2 decimal places. Who knew that Darth Vader's mask was so expensive?
Oh, wow. I'm guessing it's the real one.
I don't know, maybe if someone... Oh, you know what? That was something I edited a long time ago. Anyways, if you guys want to go ahead and take a break, I'll pause the video here. Take 15 minutes. Okay, so we're coming back from break here, and go ahead and go through the PowerPoint to this slide where we got some paging going on. Well, product ID, name, category, all this is just the same, except for we have paging. So if I pull up my control here, again, it's going to reformat everything, so we're going to lose everything. We're in grid, we're going to enable paging. And when you enable paging, you can see you get a drop-down list, whether you get a numeric pager or text. And then the only other thing, if we glance at this, we can get rid of our grid view here that I was using for practice. Pretty easy to configure paging. Thing is I'd like to center this a little bit, and you could do that with your CSS. I'll do that here in a moment. Let's take a glance at the source code. We now have a DataPager, and our DataPager has some properties, including a page size. And so we've seen page size before. Then we've got our fields element, and inside of our fields we've got, you know, our text. So if we don't want this to say first, we want it to say, doesn't matter what it says, right? We could say start, and the last could say finish. And so you could get the text to change on your buttons. If I view it in the browser, a couple ways to go about spacing this. If I inspect here, I see an ID of ListView1 _ DataPager1. So I could just target that ID in my style. And I might have to mess with this for just a second to get this right. It was an ID. If I just try a good old text align center, let's see what that does. I might didn't listen to me. It's being applied. It's just not moving. Let's try with 100% and
Try align content.
align content.
Yeah. I don't think that'll work. Yeah, I think so.
Trying a few different things here.
Display. Yeah, there you go.
You know, I did something different on. I was just trying something because this already had an ID, so I was trying to use that ID. It's just not moving. Let's try this.
There you go.
There we go.
Position.
Relative positioning and push it over by %. So just force it over there, more or less. Get our paging to work. So really nothing too crazy about this. This is actually quite simple. The one thing that the textbook, as you go through and you read the textbook about this DataPager control, is that a data pager, it can be associated with different controls. So it's not tied to a ListView control, okay? But, you know, so in other words, right now our DataPager is inside of our ListView, okay? It can be external to our ListView, and then you can assign it with, you know, through its IDs. But as of right now, it's the only control that will support it. So, in other words, a ListView control is the only control that currently can work with a DataPager. So there's really no point in separating these out at this point. But in the future, they kind of made its own control, the DataPager control, so you could associate it with other controls. We were looking at the properties of the text, the next previous pager field control. If we change it to a numeric, we'd have some different properties. You know, like how many buttons do you see, you know, before you get the words next or last. For example, here you see 3 buttons before you get the ellipsis. So you might say make that 10. So you can see records 1 through 10. Okay. The next thing is to start working with groups and getting these list views to group into rows and columns. And so I kind of demonstrated that earlier today by configuring the list view. And the easiest way to do this is to change it into a tiled layout. And so you can see that's kind of a 3-column. And then what you could do is you could change a property up at the top here of the list view. Pretty simply, you can change the group item count from 3 to 2. And that will make it 2 columns instead of 3, or you could change it to 4 or 10 or whatever it may be. So that's a pretty simple way to change the number of columns. And then from there, you know, it's nice and all to have columns.
It's really hard to see what's going on there.
It is hard to see what's going on, right? So you might put some borders on it, right? So again, so on the alternating item template and on the item template, put some borders on it. Background colors, things like that. You will notice that, let's see, now there's a group template as well. But again, you don't really have to mess with this. Where you would put your bootstrap classes would be on your alternating item templates and on your item templates.
You can put on that.
So you could do you know, a div with a class of row, you know, to get your bootstrap row. And then really you got to look at the bootstrap docs. Under components and the under CSS grid system.
Get the class right.
And
though.
maybe since let's
They gotta add like opening div of the table data.
didn't like that as let me regenerate this. Let's do it one more time from I'm not sure why that error was popping up. So let's edit list view, add in our data source, configure the list view to be tiled, go into our source, change the group item count to 2. There we go. Okay, and if given some time, you know, in a lab, the book does go into how to configure it for Bootstrap. And they do give code examples, so that might not be a bad practice, but I'll hold off on that for now since it's not there in the PowerPoint. They do have some lines. Again, I think that's with Bootstrap. Again, you can configure borders on the bottom, and we did that. So on the item template, style, put in a little style there, copy it up into the alternating item template.
I think because you got thin and solid in there, it's gonna break.
You just use thin instead of like thick.
Well, thin is how thick it is, you know, it's your width,
You could just
and then solid is your style.
1
Oh,
pixel
okay,
is what I
okay,
use.
1 pixel, right.
1 pixel solid color.
So if I view this in the browser,
I'm thinking it's gonna have dashes though.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
so it's pretty much there. You got the little gap there, but it gets the job
It
done.
looked like it might have been horizontal rules to me, but
Yeah, you could figure out, again, so what's nice about this, and again, maybe you think it's nice, maybe not. You have access to the source code. If you want to add in a horizontal rule, you can add it. You know, if you want to add in a line break, if you want to add in Bootstrap, if you want to add in whatever, right? You can customize it. Lakia?
You configure with the drop down, or is that gonna be necessary to configure with the drop down?
Yeah, yes, you can. If you wanted a drop down instead of a label, and so let's see, on the edit item template,
I like to drop down the box.
could you just change
so
the
like
text
to choose,
boxes?
yes. Oh, I'm sorry, Lakia, I didn't understand.
like a drop down to choose, like if you chose something, then it would show like the list view.
No, so like the last one where you had where you like.
Oh, so here's what here's what I think you're saying. Here, if you're current view and you go to insert item template, like this.
It's like a drop down on top, and then it's like the list view.
Kind of like the last slide where you select someone's name and then it shows all the people or all the records for that name. So like if you chose a product, it would show how many you have on hand,
the
price.
details view will only pop up whenever you hit the correct entry on the drop down. So I think it's saying drop down shows a list view whenever you click on a certain. It's like tied to it's appearing to a drop down list.
Oh, in other words, putting a where clause on this data source
Where it equals to a control.
where it's equal to another control. Yeah, I don't see why not.
It's a common practice.
Well,
I think
It'd be the same way you do it last.
you think about, a grid view. Grid view is used normally to select, right? So you're displaying all the records, whereas your form view is just displaying one record, right? So this list view is very similar to a grid view in the sense that it's going to show all the records, right? And you could select a record to then display that one row of information in another control. But this would not be the control that you're displaying one record based on a selection of another one. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Sorry. Let me get out of this. So let me go into configure list view. Let me see how I can answer this by a demonstration. A list view is pretty similar to a grid view in the sense that you're displaying all the records. You with me? So this grid view, in the past we've done labs where we selected something out of the grid view, right? We selected something out of the grid view and then displayed one individual row in another control. So is that what you're asking? Can you do that here?
Not select. With the drop down function, right? You press the drop down function, it shows you like.
In a drop down list? Okay. Yeah.
You do that with it.
Oh, inside of.
Inside or outside.
Well, that would just be its own separate control. And so, yes, you can.
Would it be harder because of the code or?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
For a practical example, I think for that would be like, let's say you had a drop-down list with each separate table listed in it, like maybe categories and products and stuff like that, and then whichever one you clicked on, the list view for the products would appear, and then the list view for the categories would appear. Because the only way I can see that making sense is if you have completely separate tables.
So what I could do here I think if I'm not mistaken, the key you're saying, hey, can I have a drop-down list, and then based on what you select in the drop-down list, you display it in this control, right? And my initial response was, this control is used to display all the records. So it's not going to be responding to a drop-down list, because a drop-down list would say, okay, show some subset of the records. And this would display all the records.
So let's always display all of it.
Yeah. And Seth, what you were getting into is, okay, hey, if you want to display all of it from different tables, well, maybe. If you think about that though, you're going to have to get into this point where you're doing select statement from all the tables, you know, and that's going to hit, if you're selecting all of your tables, that's going to more than likely be a pretty slow running query,
Right.
you know. But you're just saying in order to get that to work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I follow. Okay. Okay. So I think, based on what we've done so far, we've got a layout here, we've got some paging. We've covered everything here. If not, they give us a lot of code to reference. Some of the default buttons that when you click on generate, you know, generate a delete button, these are some of the buttons that they're going to create for us. Which brings us pretty much to the end of the PowerPoint. So got a little choppy there at the end, but hopefully you guys got a pretty good understanding of this control, at least an introductory understanding of this control. Okay, and that kind of going back to our objectives, you know, we've used different templates with the list view, we've used the DataPager Control. The one thing that the PowerPoint didn't really come into were the events, and I guess to kind of demonstrate that, these events are going to be the same place as the last events, right? So you go under events, and here are your item updating, item updated, and you know if you want to generate any one of these events. So item updated, you could generate, double click, and it'll generate our event handler. And here you would write code to verify no database errors occurred. Okay, so since that's, my keyboard's freaking out. So that's updated, that's past tense, right? Then item updating, you know, this would write data validation code. You know, make sure that before you try and insert data, that your data is in fact valid for you to insert into the tables of the database. Okay, so I'll go ahead and stop the PowerPoint here.